All right, very good. Mr. Gellert, you may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. Congress has made explicit in the Immigration and Nationality Act that an individual may apply for asylum, quote unquote, whether or not they crossed at a port of entry. In 1990, that was 1980 when they adopted the Refugee Act. 1997, they again made explicit that it did not matter where you entered, you could apply for asylum. So what we have here, I believe, Your Honor, is not only a case that's dealing with an enormous potential humanitarian crisis, but a classic separation of powers case. The administration is trying to override what Congress has done. Congress has made a very explicit decision to say it doesn't matter where you enter. And the reason I think is straightforward. It's not to condone people entering between ports of entry. Congress has put in criminal penalties for that. They've also put in civil penalties. But what Congress recognized and what international law recognizes and what all experts in this area recognize, including our declarants, is that there will be times when people enter between ports of entry. But entering between a port of entry has no bearing on how much danger you may be in. And so what our declarations show is that there are times when people enter between ports of entry where they just simply couldn't help it. Right now, they're being pushed back from ports of entry by the Mexican government. They're not even allowed to be put on lists. There are young children in Mexico who are begging to be put on the list at a port of entry who are not allowed to. There are long lines. CBP is pushing people back. Sometimes they tell families, well, you can go to a different port that's 50 miles away. And contrary to the narrative that's been out there publicly, these are not all criminals, cartel members who are coming here. These are families. Yesterday, one of our counsel were out there, and little boys are trying to get their teddy bears. They're here without their parents, trying to get in. This is a real humanitarian crisis, and Congress could not have been clearer. It cannot be that you could not apply for asylum simply because you entered between a port of entry. And so what the president is trying to do is simply override that. And I think in response to the government's suggestion that there's a crisis here, I think there's a legal and factual response to that. The legal response is what I've just said. Congress has made the decision. And contrary to the administration's claim that there's now an immediate crisis going on, this is a long-term issue that Congress has been dealing with. By the government's own admission, there were less than 400,000 apprehensions at the border. If you look at 2000 to 2008, there were well over 1 million apprehensions in those years, those 8 years. Congress has been well aware of this issue and has taken a variety of steps, but the one thing it's never done is say you can't apply for asylum. And that's just because of the fundamental special nature of asylum. Congress can do a lot. No one is here condoning people crossing between borders, but ultimately people will cross borders because they don't know where the ports are, because they're pushed back, because criminal elements push them in between ports, and Congress has said you have to be able to apply for asylum.